I always try to be the best at whatever I'm doing. And if I'm not, I still tell myself I'm the best. You got to believe it, right? I mean...
Hello everybody, welcome back to The Body Serve. I'm Jonathan.
I'm James.
We have returned from Charleston, the Credit One Open. I've been twice, and both times that I went, I came back and I said to you, you would absolutely love this tournament, you'd love this city. Did you like Charleston?
I did. I loved it. Lest the listeners think that I complain about everything. I loved it. And when you recommend something, I'm usually inclined to disagree.
Really?
Just because I'm normally contrarian, but I couldn't help it.
It goes back to what I said on the last episode where I rued the fact that you don't just listen to me when I try to tell you how to live your life.
Yeah, okay. The people don't need to hear all that. But it's a lovely tournament. The site is beautiful. The folks that work at the tournament are very nice. Maybe this is just what people are like in South Carolina. It's my first time there. Southerners are very friendly compared to people up here in Toronto and where I grew up.
Canada has the reputation, and Canadians have the reputation of being polite. And I think people often conflate that with friendly. They are not the same things.
Polite, definitely. Warm, not as much.
What did you like about the tournament?
Well, I already Instagrammed this, but the color scheme is just so good. There were deep purples all over the place in the stadium. All of the branding was purple. And then set against the natural green backdrop, like the beautiful nature that actually surrounds the tournament site, it was really pretty to look at. I've liked this tournament for a long time just watching it on TV because of the quality of the draws it gets, from the enthusiasm you can sense from players even when you're not there. And it's, on the women's side, our only clay tournament in North America during this time.
The tournament gets good feels every year. It may be a function of how well the players are treated at this tournament, that they feel like they want to come back year after year after year. Also, I get the sense that a lot of players, given the opportunity to stay stateside a little bit longer before heading out for the long European clay swing, this gives them a chance to get some practice in and stay closer to home for a little bit longer.
And it's sort of an entree to the red clay in Europe. It's the green clay, which apparently is quite slippery, but it's not quite as slow as red clay. After going to Miami in the US Open, I know what I was looking for, and that was something a bit smaller, more accessible, just easier to get around and get in and out of, and to be able to watch a lot of tennis and not feel like you're missing too much if you're, staying for a whole match. And this tournament was ideal for that. I found it easy to get in and out of. The lines weren't really too long anywhere. It's set on Danielle Island, which is part of Charleston that is really bougie. And they have very clear zoning laws because all the buildings look a certain way. It's a very pretty area. You can actually sneak out of the tournament site and go to Subway if you don't want to buy overpriced food on site.
One day you were stuck, you were going to be stuck on Althea Gibson to watch Taylor Townsend play Vika Azarenka. There was no way you'd be able to leave to get food and come back and get a seat. Mm-hmm. And I knew that, so I went to just get you something to eat so that, you could just sit there. And I bought you this prosciutto mozzarella sandwich. And you sat there and looked at it and almost barfed.
I mean, on its face, that sounds fine. But it was spread with this. It had like this tomato marinara cold sauce spread on it. And I did just want to barf.
So you ended up just eating the mozzarella.
So there was one instance where you weren't right about something.
That is entirely to do with your picky eating habits.
Well, you were coming on here and profiling like, oh, look how much I care for you. I brought you this, and you want everybody to hear this. So I didn't like the sandwich. But that's not an actual complaint about the tournament.
No, that's on you entirely.
Right.
But to your point about the tournament being more casual and laid back and not as frantic as Miami or the US Open, you're not even getting that many matches per day. But you don't feel like you're being cheated for option or quality or quantity.
Not at all.
Even though we were worried that this was going to be the first time we'd been on site at a tournament to just, outside of press, to just take in quarterfinals day as a spectator. Mm-hmm. And we're like, well, what is it going to be like? 3 matches? There's nothing going on in the outer courts. Like, is this even worth it? Do we want to do that? And that day was bomb.
Right. Look at the material. 3 of the top 4 seeds making it. The first 2 matches were each like 3 hours long. You were really getting a lot of bang for your buck each session, even though it's a smaller draw on a smaller site.
Mm-hmm. The long and short of it is that we absolutely recommend this tournament. We will get into some of the other things that we enjoyed as we continue through the episode. But right now we want to stop and give a bit of a history of the tournament. When we were approaching this week, you said to me specifically that you wanted to give a bit of a historical touch to the tournament on the next episode. Not a full research episode, clearly, but do something more than just, oh, we were there, haha, we did this, we drank that, we saw this. Give a little bit of context and texture to the episode. And I was wondering, well, how are we going to do this? Because it's everybody can access Wikipedia.
Right. Right.
And so what was really cool for me in figuring this out was that it just revealed itself as the week went on through conversations with people. If you're listening to this episode, you know who you are. I don't think I want to, or you may not want me to call you by name. I don't know. From being in downtown Charleston, from seeing the plaques that are all over the city, from visiting historical sites, and not least of which from visiting the International African American Museum. So I'll let you start with a little bit of a background on the tournament.
You may know that the Charleston Open is the oldest women's tournament in the United States. Founded in 1973, the same year of the founding of the Women's Tennis Association. At that time, in the early 70s, women's tennis was still being administered by the International Lawn Tennis Federation, the ILTF, which is now the ITF. In September of 1970, Billie Jean King and the Original Nine were able to secure a sponsorship with Virginia Slims, the cigarette company, and in the following year, just a few months later, launched a full circuit in 1971. In June of 1973, Billie Jean King officially founded the WTA Tour at a meeting in London just before Wimbledon, and this united all of the women's tennis under one organization. And it brought together both that ILTF circuit, which was called the Grand Prix, and the Virginia Slims tournaments, which had been growing over the past 2 years.
So many tournaments have their names changed over the years. And so it becomes a little bit difficult to keep track of which tournament was which, when, won by whom, and how many times, right? Miami has had many different names. Charleston started out as the Family Circle Cup, and it was that for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. For over 40 years. The tournament was originally held in Hilton Head, which is about 90 miles southwest of Charleston, on the coast, closer to the border with Georgia, still in that Carolina Low Country, and the tournament moved to its current site in Danielle Island in 2001.
It was the first women's tournament to offer a $100,000 purse, the first women's-only tournament to be broadcast on TV, and Rosie Casals was the first winner of the Family Circle Cup, winning $30,000 in 1973.
That was the biggest payout from a single tournament in that year on the women's side. This tournament has been a really important landmark in women's tennis history, and so it's always tied up in this fight for equity and equality in women's sports. Billie Jean King and the Original Nine and others were fighting for equal prize money everywhere, but they were fighting just for a tour that they could administer with a little more self-governance. And Charleston was kind of foundational in that early WTA tour. It's where Steffi Graf won her very first title. It's where Martina Hingis achieved the #1 ranking in 1997 after she won the title. It's where Gabby Sabatini made her professional debut, and on and on. You may also remember that Serena Williams famously pulled out of this tournament in 2000 amid an economic boycott by the NAACP in protest of South Carolina continuing to fly the Confederate flag on the dome of their state house. South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union ahead of the Civil War. It's the site of the first shots fired during the Civil War at Fort Sumter. The people who supported the Confederate flag would argue that it has deep cultural importance to the state.
While there is the International African American Museum in Charleston, there are also Confederate museums.
Right. Serena, who had just won her first major title at that time, decided to boycott. Later in 2000, the Confederate flag was moved off the dome of the State House and moved to a monument in front of the State House. But it was not fully removed until 2015. And sadly, what it took for it to be fully removed was the Emmanuel AME Church shooting in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015, where black churchgoers were murdered by a white supremacist.
The reason why one of the courts at this tournament is called the Althea Gibson Club Court, it was formerly the main center court at this site, is because Althea Gibson was from South Carolina.
Yep, she was from Clarendon County, which is about a 90-minute drive from Daniel Island. She moved to New York City when she was very young, but she was originally from South Carolina, and she's featured in the African American Museum as an innovator.
Now, why the history of this region is important when talking about this tournament and visiting this tournament is because more than 40% of the enslaved people brought to the United States entered through ports in Charleston. Think about that for a moment. That is, it's hard to comprehend. And so what you have is a region that was once one of the wealthiest in the British Commonwealth, certainly one of the wealthiest cities in the United States of America, a city whose wealth was generated on the backs of enslaved people who never went on to share in that wealth.
And a city itself that was built by enslaved people. And so when I was going to Charleston, I knew that this was a major port where enslaved people were brought, that there were markets, that there were auction blocks that you can still go see, and there are museums commemorating this incredible human suffering. But it's like difficult because Charleston is such an incredibly beautiful city.
It's a fun place.
Right, and it's well preserved, and there is a party aspect to it as well, but it's, for me and for you, it's hard to kind of separate what you know to be the history of this place and what it is now.
It's difficult to go to the International African American Museum, have that experience, immerse yourself in that, and then walk back to the city center and you see Kaylee and Riley and Colton and Brock hopping and skipping down the street, drunk off their heads, having a lark in their sundresses and polos and boat shoes.
And it doesn't mean that nobody should have fun or that racism isn't very real in all places in the United States. It's just
specific to this place.
Well, it's also so visceral. It's impossible to miss in Charleston.
The concentration of the racial history in Charleston is so much more than most other cities in the U.S. that host tennis tournaments.
The African American Museum is something I think we both highly recommend. If you're in Charleston, I would definitely go. It's really, really well done. It's built on the site of Gadsden's Wharf, which was the biggest disembarkation place for slave ships entering Charleston.
It costs, $22 to get in? Mm-hmm. Takes about 90 minutes to go through it and immerse yourself in the experience, depending on the pace that you go. There are audiovisual learning tools. There is a prayer house.
There are actually quiet rooms because some of the exhibits are really difficult to take. There is also a family history center where Black American people can look up their family lineage, and maybe in a way they've never been able to before.
All throughout downtown Charleston, there are plaques commemorating the actual sites of where so much of this slave trade happened in Charleston, right? We were walking down a side street and affixed to a light pole was a plaque saying that this was where enslaved people were essentially held in waiting and then prepped. The word prepped really was heavy for me reading that. And it's just impossible, well, for me at least, to be in downtown Charleston, to be in Charleston and not engage with its history. And you should, is where I'm coming with this. Right. I think if you do go to Charleston, if you go to tennis at the Credit One Open, this needs to be part of your experience. And further, and moreover, I would like to see the tournament engage with this history of Charleston more than just naming one of its show courts, the Althea Gibson Club Court. I would like to maybe see them, when you go to buy your tickets, have an option to make a donation to the African American Museum. Have some kind of collaboration between the two. At this point, I see it as an opportunity for the tournament to really engage further with the community. Because this tournament is clearly a huge part of the Charleston sporting fabric. Everywhere we went, tennis was on the TV.
And the tournament itself is a place where you can see these intersections of the fight for women's equality in general, and also a place where Black American women have succeeded, right? There have been 4 Black champions of this tournament. Venus, Serena, Sloane, Madison. It has clearly a great tradition. So I agree. It would be cool to see the tournament situated more firmly in the history of the region as well. They do so many things well. That could be one more thing to even elevate the experience. Because again, it doesn't mean that you can't have fun or you can't enjoy yourself. But to hold those two things at the same time is how I wanted to approach going to Charleston.
Going to tennis tournaments, you automatically encounter a lot of wealth. You see a lot of wealth all around you.
Yes.
But then also at this tournament, it's even heightened because of where the tournament is.
Who owns it?
Right?
Owned by Ben Navarro, the father of Emma Navarro, the owner of BMOC Capital, which also owns Cincinnati.
You go downtown, you see a lot of very expensive restaurants. You see hotels that you almost expect a Sprinter van to pop up and Real Housewives to start spilling out of. There's so much wealth in this area.
So this is 400-year-old wealth.
Right.
That comes from rice and later cotton.
And so where I'm coming from is that I would just like to see the tournament engage more with the Black history of Charleston. Althea Gibson is right there. You have such an opportunity to uplift this woman's name even more than it already is. And also to put money into Black people's pockets at a base level. That should be a targeted initiative in some way, in my opinion, tethered to the African American Museum. Now that we've talked a bit about the history of the tournament in Charleston, let's get into some of our on-site experiences as well as the actual tennis. This was your first viewing experience live at a clay tournament. What was green clay or even clay like for you?
Well, technically, we did go to the Rome tournament. I think we may have seen half a match and the entire time. No, that's not an exaggeration. We were there the 2 days that we had tickets. It rained both days. And then on the 3rd day, when we flew out, they put together one of the greatest schedules of play probably in tennis history. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Roger, Rafa, Novak, Venus, Serena, all crammed in one day. Anyway.
Clay. I totally forgot about that. So what was your first green clay viewing experience like?
I'll tell you, I was very excited to get off hard courts. I'm sure the dolls are just as excited, save their joints a little bit.
The dolls being the players?
Yes.
Okay.
Male and female, by the way. That's not a gender term for me.
Okay.
I enjoyed just getting a different bounce, just getting a different spin, court speed. You can see the creativity that's required to build points on clay, even green clay. I know green clay has its detractors, but I think it offers something unique.
I was there, and within a few points, I was like, oh, we are in drop shot season.
Right. And we watched a lot of Dasha Kasatkina, a lot, which I was happy about.
And you are never ever beating those allegations.
Oh, stalker allegations?
Stalker allegations.
I'll tell you
never
I'll tell you something in a minute, which will prove that I cannot beat them. But being able to sit on the side of the court, rather than at a baseline or behind the players, being on the side and looking at the height of the ball and the different micro decisions that players make within a point, the way that Dasha, fave, can flatten out her forehand when she needs to, but the type of variety she has on her backhand. I know people get frustrated watching her, but she displays a lot of creativity.
Is that the bit that's going to prove that you're never beating the allegations?
No.
Okay, that's still to come. I loved being able to see the ball marks.
Yeah.
That was one of the most fascinating parts of watching tennis up close, specifically on Althea Gibson Club Court. There may be 20, 30 seats on that court that you're not able to sit in. Everything else you can access.
Oh, there are paid seats on Althea Gibson?
Like coach reserve seats, that kind of stuff. But by and large, you can line up and plan to sit anywhere. And I sat everywhere on that court.
Yep.
And all the different looks that you get, it made me really consider where is my favorite spot to watch tennis from. It's not in a stadium court, I can tell you that.
No.
It's probably, picture being able to sit 3 or 4 rows courtside along the sidelines, 3 or 4 rows back. You're a couple rows behind the coaches. I was able to listen to Kamau coach Sloane through her doubles matches. I saw her shoot him looks. I saw her cuss multiple times in one match. I saw all the frustrations. I saw the unending positivity that he sent her way. Come on, baby girl. Come on, baby girl. You got this. She was playing with Ashlyn Kruger, and he would say, come on, baby girl. You got this. Come on, Ashlyn. To both of them.
Right.
You're able to see the spins. I love being directly behind the baseline. That's fun, but I think my favorite spot is at the very end of the sideline, a couple rows back.
Yes, I know where you like to
where
sit.
you can see the court diagonally. You can still see all lines, but you're close enough to the players on the baseline to really check out what's going on with all players involved because they switch sides so often. Mm-hmm. And I'm able to lean back against the guardrails because I'm right in the corner. That's a better, more comfortable position to sit in rather than just, crouched in your seat and having to turn your head from side to side. You're just looking forward, essentially.
Imagine if the court is a compass, you like to sit in southwest or south-southwest. You may not know what that means, but other people will.
Facing the chair umpire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The chair umpire is east, and Juliet is the sun.
Okay.
That's the Shakespeare thing.
Thank you. There were a couple times when the players seemed to miss the actual ball mark that they should have been looking at, and people, myself included, and those around me, were like, no, that's the ball mark. That's the ball mark. What's going on here? We got to see the courts being swept from very close up. That was really cool.
Mm-hmm. On Wednesday, it rained a lot. We had tickets for the Wednesday day and night session, the daily double or whatever they call it there. So we knew this time we didn't make the same mistake as we have previously. We went off and did our thing we didn't stay on site. When we got there at around 4 o'clock, the rain had stopped, but the courts were soaked, waterlogged. They had not been covered. And so they have these sort of flattening things that they roll across the court, and then they sweep it a bunch. And apparently they also need wind to help take away some of the water. But they played on these damp courts after they restarted play.
Since the last time I was in Charleston, the site has had significant upgrades. You can tell just how much money has been poured into this tournament. Last time I was there, Althea Gibson Club Court had bleacher seating. Now there were individual seats all throughout that stadium, that outer court. The main stadium, their makeshift bleacher seats, they've been added tenfold. And the seats all have different colors. There's like 5 different colors for the seats in the main stadium. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's not like they go red, yellow, purple, black, green, and repeat. It's all kind of shades of beige, cream, deep brown, deep green kind of thing. And it gives this effect of having the stadium seem more full than it might be. Not that that's a problem for them, but it adds...
It's just visually appealing.
It adds color.
Yeah, literally.
To the viewing experience live, at least. I don't know what it looked like on TV.
I read that this stadium went from around 7,000 capacity to 11,000 fairly recently. And I will say, if you're asking for a tip, the 200 level is great because you get an assigned seat and everything, but I don't think it is that different from general admission. If you want to save a little money and not worry about if someone is sitting in your seat and will argue with you about it, general admission is such a great value. You can sit wherever you want, and you're not really fighting for space. Even during those quarterfinals, we sat in GA and had a great experience.
Yeah. I sat at one point at the very top of the stadium because I wanted to see what it was like. And you could still see the tennis really well.
Far.
You can get away from people. You can enter the GA section in between points. You can move around whenever you want, get all different kinds of viewing angles. You can try and run away from the sun if you want to. The daily double you mentioned, at this tournament, the majority of the play happens during the day. So, for example, on the Wednesday we went, I think the day session would have cost, say, $60 for a 200 level seat, which is not bad. But then they say, buy a daily double, pay $20 more, and you get that same seat for the entire day's play. That is incredible value. And so when that day session on Wednesday was rained out and they said, sorry, if you got a daily double that day, you don't qualify for anything, I wasn't that mad about it.
Right.
Because it was already such a steal.
Because it's like, you already got your deal. Don't ask for more. The only thing is that because of the rain on Thursday, they invited any day session holders from Wednesday to come on Thursday.
Yeah.
Like as a refund, basically.
So then they could sit in general admission on Stadium Court as well as access all the outer courts, including Althea Gibson.
Right.
Which made that day's lineup on Althea Gibson particularly hard to get into because you had matches like Taylor Townsend and Victoria Azarenka, which was packed from the first point.
Yes. Luckily, I got in there, and it was actually by accident because I read the schedule wrong. I was looking for Dasha again. So
Is this the stalking thing?
So I watched an entire Svitolina match. I saw her beat... Oh, I forgot who she beat. But I watched Svitolina, which was cool. It was the first time I had really watched her in person during her return to tennis. And then I thought Dasha was coming on. But look, I got a great seat for Townsend Azarenka, which turned out to be a great match.
I can't recall the last time I sat at a match live for its entirety. Well,
and this was a long
I've watched 2-set matches, but a full, long 3-set tussle, I couldn't tell you the last time I've done that, but I did that for that match.
I get, I have to move around.
I like to go and watch a set here. I don't care if it's competitive. I almost prefer if somebody really just plays the tennis of their life and I get to see some really cool shots. And then that's enough and I get to move on and see somebody else. I'd like to see as many people as I can in one day.
But I always find at a tournament, you do find yourself seeing the same player a number of times. And you always hope, like you said during Miami, that it's the champion. And it was. But this time Danielle Collins came in as the Miami champion, as somebody who was always featured on center court. So you were always pretty much guaranteed a seat to watch her, even if you just had general admission. And when I tell you, Danielle was in fine form the entire tournament. She had to play Ons Jabeur early on, who was the defending champion, lost a set to her, but it was definitive in the end.
Back to that day, the Thursday, with Vika and Taylor Townsend on Althea Gibson. That match was going on the same time as Nepo Navarro playing Jacqueline Christian.
Yes.
On center
Navarro
court.
obviously got center.
Obviously.
Well,
why is it obvious? I mean, that scheduling was wild to me. And on top of that, Townsend and Vika were originally scheduled on court 3. And then that was changed. Somebody had something to say about it. Exactly.
That's sick.
So you schedule Nepo Navarro on stadium and have Townsend, Vika on court 3? Mad. Ridiculous.
It is, of course, mad. Navarro is having a great year. No doubt about that. But I don't even think that the folks from South Carolina were there really looking for Navarro.
Well, I mean, they've seen her for over half a decade now, because back when she was ranked 2,722, she was getting wildcards into qualifying as a 9-year-old, and she's been at that tournament ever since.
But Jacqueline Christian was on her anti-American run, because she knocked out the 2019 champion Madison Keys the night we arrived, and unfortunately didn't get to see Madison at all. And then she beat Emma Navarro on the main stage of her father's tournament.
What are some of the other notable moments that we witnessed?
Yeah, Taylor Townsend, Ekaterina Alexandrova. Alexandrova,
at night,
who had beaten Iga Swiatek in Miami, was on this tear, and is somebody, I mean, who can just bash the ball.
Top 20 player.
We were able to sit behind the baseline, right near the clubhouse at Althea Gibson. And you've probably seen the photo on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. 5 of us, tennis Twitter folks, were in a row during that match, including Bree and Tony.
Shout out to Bree and Tony. Loved catching up. It's been years at this point.
Yeah, Tony, who I've been knowing for years. But Bree, somehow, it's the first time we ever met. And it was so great to finally meet her. She's been on this podcast before, but I wasn't there. But Townsend Alexandrova was a fantastic, an environment. Taylor was serving like mad. She just kept her composure against a player who had so much experience in moments like this. And it's just very cool at this tournament because you feel like you have access to players. As we were leaving the court, Taylor was just kind of there with her dad. And
I had just left to use the porta potties directly outside of Althea Gibson.
Yeah, so this it was like those fancy trailer kinds, you know?
This is not a TMI moment. When I emerged from that place, I opened the door and literally Taylor is 5 feet away from me, hugging her dad and her sister. And we then walk from the site toward stadium.
Basically.
With each other, essentially.
Her? It was a sort of awkward.
It was really awkward.
I mean, even at big tournaments, you can get pretty close to players. This just felt so intimate because it was at night after this win.
Taylor's having a stream of consciousness of what's going through her mind at the moment. She's expressing incredulity at her scheduling time for the following day because she was finishing up after 10 p.m. here, and then they had her scheduled for like 12 something or 1 o'clock the next day, and she's like, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, like I don't have enough rest. She eventually went on a little bit later in the afternoon against Vika, played a great match, lost in 3 sets there. Of course, Vika made the quarterfinals and played Pegula.
An observation of watching Taylor play, I've seen her play before, and so often in the past, she seemed overly reliant on rushing the net. That was her plan 1A, her 1B, her 1C. She won that first set against Vika from the baseline. She did much of her winning at this tournament from the baseline. I think she's finally understanding that she has the game to compete with most of these women from the baseline.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until she started mixing it up in the second set with the lead at the time, trying to come to net more, that the momentum started to shift. And so hopefully that's something that she takes with her moving forward, because Taylor Townsend bombing serves and killing it from the baseline was a treat to watch.
Yes, she can actually rally with these women. And I don't think that was always the case, where she felt comfortable with her ground strokes.
After her win over Alexandrova, she said to the crowd, interviewed by Nick McCarville at the moment, shout out to Nick, I'm glad you guys got to see this because it's just the beginning. That's what she said. That is the swag that this woman has.
Do you know what that does to a crowd at 10
right?
p.m.? They believe it.
I saw Ashlyn Kruger quite a bit. We saw her play singles, lose her singles match.
Yeah, to Dasha.
We saw her play doubles with Sloane Stephens, the eventual champions. She's 19 years old, coached by Michael Joyce, apparently. I have to say, I was thoroughly impressed.
Yes.
Save for the multitudinous double faults at inopportune moments in tie breaks with Sloane. In their quarterfinals, she served back-to-back double faults in that deciding tiebreak, as well as one in the first set tiebreak. And then again in the final, she served a double fault, fixed that blemish with an ace right after that. She's young. I mean, those nerves in those moments, they're understandable. She has a big serve. She can kill the ball from the baseline. She has an enviable tennis physique, honestly. I'm sure a lot of these women look at her and be like, I wish I was that tall. I wish I had that power. I mean, there's just, she's a name we've been seeing quite a bit in the last year, but this was the first time I was able to see her play live, and I am a believer. I think this young woman is going to be a star of U.S. women's tennis. Really? I really do.
We were able to see their quarterfinal match in Althea Gibson Club Court when Nick McCarville came on court afterward to interview Sloane and Ashlyn. Sloane did most of the talking, of course. Sloane is the superstar. And man, he asked her about her age several times. And I swear, if it had been anyone else doing the interviewing, Sloane would not have taken it as well. But she talked about how when she was a young player, she paired with Janina Wickmeyer. Mm-hmm. And Janina was so kind to her and helped kind of show her the ropes. And she'll always remember that. And she, at this point, feels like that person for Ashlyn.
And for us, when we were young and just starting out in tennis, Blair Henley was incredibly kind to us. Nick McCarville was very kind to us. Courtney Nguyen, Ben Rothenberg, everybody that we've met, especially those who don't come from the tennis establishment, were so welcoming to us. Mm-hmm. Vika was everywhere this week. Mm-hmm. She kept winning. Got to the quarterfinals where she lost a heartbreaker to Jessie Pegula. And throughout this run, Leo was on site. Her son was on site every single match. We saw her after her win over Cocciaretto. Mm-hmm. Did I say that okay?
Yeah. It's like the English-y version.
Okay. Leo came out on court afterward. He was even interviewed by Nick McCarville. Nick asked him, so do you think mommy can go all the way and win in Charleston this week? And he's like, yeah. And then Vika took him to hit all the balls to the crowd. You know, after a match, typically they sign balls and then hit one to each quadrant. Leo got to do that at the match. He was on Tennis Channel. He was everywhere.
We saw Vika up close at the Grandstand in Miami. Saw her up close at Althea Gibson here. If you ever watched Azarenka in person, it is an intense experience.
It really is.
Vika is just a lot. I mean, and that contributes to her star power. She's just a lot.
She has a speed dial in her pocket to the manager at all times.
Yeah.
Somebody will question a call, but nobody quite questions a call like Miss Azarenka. There's a certain level of incredulity and indignation.
That's the word yeah.
I mean, they go hand in hand. It's a 1-2 step. It starts out as incredulity and then the indignation. And I get how that may rub people the wrong way. At a certain point, I was just like, can we move on? As a live spectator, right. You know? There was a moment against Taylor where Victoria hit a ball that just clipped the baseline, but it was called out. And in the motion of playing that ball back before it was called out, Taylor hit the ball in the net. And so the umpire made the decision that they should replay the point. Because Taylor had hit the ball in the net, Vika was of the opinion that she should have won that point. That went on way too long.
Vika cussed, as they say in the South, and she got a code for unsportsmanlike conduct.
I didn't quite see what she did.
She went in the corner where we couldn't really see. I think she just hit the tarp around the court.
That's the other thing about being at live tennis. You're there, but you don't quite see the totality, as Petra Kvitova would say the day of this eclipse.
Yeah.
You don't quite see everything that happens on court because you get one chance. And if you miss it, and if you don't have the right angle, you don't see it. So a lot of times folks message us on Twitter or tag us on Twitter to be, oh my God, you're there. What was it like? I haven't the slightest clue.
No.
Totally missed it.
I told you about the Andy Murray match. I literally couldn't see because somebody stood up, right? I didn't know that he had gotten injured in that moment. We got a marvelous quarterfinal lineup at this tournament. We were lucky enough to be able to go on Friday to watch the quarterfinals. Day session is packed with 3 of the singles quarterfinals. It was starting out Kasatkina versus Christian, Pegula Azarenka, Mertens Collins, and Kudermetova Sakari. So that's seeds 1, 3, and 4, plus the Miami champion, plus the 11 seed Elisa Mertens, who dismissed Svitolina easily.
It was so quick and comprehensive.
It was.
I had this experience watching Miss Mertens in Cincinnati, and I've said it to anybody who would listen since, and it was confirmed again at this tournament. You watch Elisa on TV, or maybe you just listen to all the narratives that surround her, and you're convinced, you have this idea that she's just this pat a cake player, that she doesn't have much power, that she's a pusher. That's the word. That's what people say. She's a pusher. Elisa does not push. Elisa can bash.
She hits a lot harder than you'd think.
She hits first serves in the 1-teens. She blew Svitolina off that court.
Yeah. Of course, the Azarenka-Pegula match was intense. Azarenka had 4 match points in the third set tiebreak. This is after she saved 4 match points at 5-4 in the third set.
3 of those were consecutive.
Right.
Wow.
It was a lot.
Somehow, Jessie comes out of that match. Somehow.
Mm-hmm. The first quarterfinal, Kasatkina versus Christian, who was having an incredible week. Dasha had me stressing. And like later in the third set, I got the sense, it feels like Jacqueline is cooked at this point. Kasatkina lobs were just going over her head, and you can only take so much. Watching lobs go over your,
You tweeted something to that effect, and the second set wasn't even over.
I know.
And I'm sitting there on grandstand, on Althea Gibson, while you are in stadium, and I'm seeing that tweet while I'm watching Sloane and Ashlyn. And I just thought, wow, he is just setting himself up for a massive disappointment.
Right. And Jacqueline, she had us stressing in the third set. She did not go away. Dasha pulled that out. She pulled out the semifinal against Jessie Pegula and reaches her first final in, well, actually not very long. She's reached a number of 500 finals recently. She hasn't won a title in a while. Mm-hmm. But Danielle was the standard at this tournament.
Just like in Miami, she lost 1 set all tournament. This time it was to Ons Jabeur, and it was just a demolition. But for that 1 set, I think it was a 6-1 set, a demolition from start to finish. It was so impressive.
She beats the 2016 champion, Sloane, the defending champ, the 2017 champ, Kasatkina, the number 3 seed, Sakari, plus Mertens, plus Badosa. It was just, people were asking at the end of Miami, is she still going to play Charleston? She must be tired. Yeah, she got there and was committed to playing her best. Maybe she wants that Olympic spot.
She's now ranked number 15 in the world, so that is absolutely within reach. Not too long ago, early February, she was ranked in the 70s. This is what winning 13 matches in a row will do, spanning a 1,000 and a 500. Also, she did so much of this winning without a coach, without a hitting partner, traveling to Charleston by herself. I mean,
accompanied only by her $50,000 Cartier bracelet.
Her boyfriend.
Oh, yeah.
Showed up
you see what,
on championship weekend.
You see what confidence does for somebody?
She hard-launched a boyfriend at this tournament.
Right. And thank you, and I rarely say this, thank you, Tennis Channel, for having on-site coverage, for actually having a booth in the main quad. Steve Weissman was covering the tournament in person. They had...
I thought you were going to say he was covering the tournament in purple.
In purple as well, yes. On theme, for Charleston. And they also, I believe, had Chanda and Lindsay in the studio covering Charleston. But, man, Danielle feels comfortable with them because she just spilled everything. And she's very, very comfortable with Andrew Krasny on the stadium. Clearly, she has a lot of affection for him.
Despite how many times he wants to tell the same corny joke about we should just add an S and make it Danielle's Island.
Danielle's Island.
Well, in fact, you would need to add an L, an E,
Yes.
an apostrophe, and an S.
All right. It was a cute joke the one time. It's called Danielle Island.
Yeah.
But, by the way.
The site of the tournament, yeah. She beats Dasha in that final. It was in doubt only for the first 17 minutes when they played only 2 games.
Yeah.
Those 2 games took 17 minutes, and then it was writing on the wall. This woman is on a mission. She's unstoppable. And we get so many cute moments. We get Dasha giving a victory speech in defeat. She
basically gave the Collins speech from Miami.
Yeah. She loves this tournament.
Wow.
She won it in 2017, where she famously beat Yelena Ostapenko, who went on to win the French Open that year.
Mm-hmm. And who famously said in her runner-up speech that basically Dasha's not talented. It was like...
It was so messy.
But they're cool now, by the way.
Who isn't cool with Dasha?
Exactly.
Dasha got emotional, talking about how welcomed she feels at this tournament, which is all sorts of coded, potentially, with other layers of meaning.
And think about that. Somebody who may not feel welcomed at home anymore.
Her partner was with her the entire time. We got such a kick. Based on where I like to sit in that corner of the court on the sideline, I told you, it's often, well, depending on which corner you choose, you're going to get one of the coaching teams, right? They don't sit beside each other. One takes one corner, the other takes the other corner. And lo and behold, as this match is starting, as Dasha is being announced on court, out comes Natasha in leather. She's wearing a leather jacket, walks straight to the front, sits down, immediately pulls out her tiny, 2x2 camera and starts vlogging. She starts taking footage to, for the next episode.
She had a few devices going, but it was, it's like, oh my God, we're in the back. This is the behind the scenes of the famous Kasatkina YouTube page.
Mm-hmm. Dasha thanked Natasha any chance she got. I don't know how many of the people on site got that.
I was like, who was this person?
Yeah. Is that her coach?
Right.
Is that her physio?
Natalia is, by the way, is an Olympic silver medalist in figure skating as part of the team competition in 2018. And, this tournament was about Danielle. She has gotten so comfortable on this big stage. And imagine if you could set an expiration date for your career and then just play your best tennis.
Of your life.
How rare this is why people are responding like they are.
Because they've wanted this from her.
Yes.
They've seen that this could happen for her for a while. And for any number of reasons, it hasn't happened. So many of them likely outside of Danielle's control. But like you said, to announce in January at the Australian Open, to the surprise of everybody, that this is your final year. And then to just go about this streak across 2 surfaces like it's nothing. There hasn't been a lot of strife in this stretch. It's just been giving people the business over and over and over, looking like a boss doing it.
While this final was going on, the NCAA Division I women's basketball final was happening. South Carolina versus Iowa. The Houston final was going on. The first final between 2 Black American men in ATP history. That was being covered on ESPN. It was a lot, but to see the South Carolina team led by Dawn Staley take the national title on the same day, it just felt like kismet. We were just in South Carolina. Charleston's going on. It just felt like such an important moment for women's sports across the board. And then to see the ratings for the basketball final, over, 18 million people?
It's almost as if you invest in women's sport, despite what you've been conditioned to believe, and despite all the sexism and the noise, that this can happen. It's almost,
will watch, right?
It's almost that stories will emerge, regardless of who's playing.
The narratives are there.
Yeah. So yeah, I felt completely fulfilled by my tennis experience this week.
Now, this might be kind of a long episode, but let me go back to when I said the Dasha stalker allegations are true. Because I was having my lunch at 5 p.m. and sitting in this kind of stage area where they have a bar and whatever. Lo and behold, who walks up but Tracy Austin, Jenny Brady, and Daria Kasatkina. They're going to do a demonstration, a sushi making demonstration with a local chef. Like, oh my God. If she looks out here and she's like, oh, he was at all my matches. What is going on?
She definitely did not
No,
see
she
you.
didn't. It was an accident. I didn't know they were going to be there. But then we had front row seats, me and Bree, actually, for this sushi making demonstration. Tracy was asked, they each make their own hand rolls, and then they get to eat them. But then once the hand rolls were made, they were kind of just waiting there and you could tell Dasha was hungry. She really wanted to eat.
She had just finished her match. Less than an hour ago, she just finished her match.
So Tracy has been asked about restaurants in Charleston, and she is going on, giving us lots of great tips. But Dasha is holding this piece of sushi, looking at it, and eventually she's just like, forget it. I cannot stop myself from eating. But it was just really cute. Like, she was hugging up on Jenny Brady. They seemed to be close. It was just such a cool thing to see these players up front in person. And Tracy and Jenny were both ambassadors for the Charleston tournament, so you saw them all over the place on site. The next day, sitting in the same spot, Jenny's back.
But who is she with?
Then they say, and John is... What? Who asked for that?
It was a blemish to my experience.
I mean, he wasn't even there with Tennis Channel. I was so confused, why is he there? And you know what? I will never know because I left.
The gist of it is that he's been doing commentating. He'll be doing more commentating. We're never getting rid of him. He's going to be there.
No.
They're soft launching all these retired Americans all over the place. Alison Risk is out here commentating now. Coco Vanderway is commentating.
If Bethany Maddock ever retires, she will be back commentating all the time.
Yeah.
Although on Tennis Channel, you can do both. I mean, you can practically commentate your own matches. Last thing about Charleston, the first serve, which is the signature cocktail, it brought comparisons to the Honey Deuce. First serve is made with Grey Goose vodka, some kind of lemonade, and I actually don't really know what else, because the recipe seemed different every time we got it.
There's some pea flower thing, some purple thing.
Only one time I got an edible flower in the drink, and it's kind of purple. It's like a pale purple. Let me tell you, if you want value for your money, they are pouring at least 2 full ounces of Grey Goose. And I mean at least.
Minimum. The very precise and by-the-book bartenders are filling up the 1 ounce pour, tipping it, filling it up again, tipping it. Others are just keeping the bottle tilted and filling, bottle still going, come again, pour, filling, and then a couple more drops for good measure.
There were a few of those that tasted like a vodka water, plus a little lemon. So, $18.95, great deal. Because the Honey Deuce at 22 or whatever it is now, early in the tournament, tastes strong. And then you go where they have the pre-mixed ones. I don't think there's any liquor in that. Or not much.
The frozen ones. You can't convince
I
me
never
that the
found
frozen
one.
ones...
The frozen ones were you had to follow a treasure map to find them.
People were asking, what is it like? Compare, let me know. And nothing will beat the frozen Honey Deuce for me.
Okay.
But in terms of value for your money, and we're talking about money that is a lot. We're talking about for $18.75 you get, that's still a lot.
Well, because it's also plus tax, plus tip.
Plus conversion to Canadian dollars.
Oh, yeah, the conversion rate is rough these days.
I just remembered that Brie posted the recipe. It's Grey Goose, butterfly pea flower infused low country lemonade, club soda, and a lemon wheel. That's what it is. And they were also selling this watermelon love, which sounded really good. I didn't try that one. It was Grey Goose watermelon basil, muddled watermelon and basil, club soda. We did try the Moet Frosé.
Wow. I felt like Lisa Vanderpump.
That was a moment. I'll have to give it to them. I don't even want to tell you what it cost. It cost more than a Honey Deuce.
Did it?
It did.
No.
Yes, James.
Oh, really?
Yes, James.
Oh, anyway, they said, do you want a little Shandong topper? And I'm like, yeah, why not?
It comes with it.
Well, they asked. The first guy asked. I didn't know, but it was lovely. I
do want to say, though, that I appreciated the variety of drinks on offer. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to have a cocktail. You could have a beer, which was actually fairly reasonable for stadium prices. You could get one of those canister beers of like McUltra for $8.95. They also had Cutwater products, which we are big fans of. Those Cutwater drinks.
Oh, yeah.
They come with a high ABV. Mm-hmm. And they're tasty. They manage to capture actual cocktail tastes in cooler form. That said, the price for those I thought were absolutely outrageous. Like charging some places you went, it was $14 something, $15 for one, like a small beer can,
like a 12-ounce can.
Yeah. Or if you did the self-serve thing, it was $17 and change.
More?
Yeah.
Oh.
Those cost $3.80 Canadian each at the LCBO.
You're at a sporting event. It's going to be outrageous.
I understand, but that in particular was outrageous. Outrageous, I thought. I also like that in Charleston, maybe it's a South Carolina thing, most places you go, if you do not care for alcohol, you can still experience the vibe of the moment by having a non-alcoholic beverage that's made with 0%.
Yeah, like zero proof liquors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which was new to me. I didn't know anything about that. And so they're not cheap. Like most of them go from $10 to $12, but there's care and thought that's put into creating these craft non-alcoholic cocktails. We're going to briefly mention the winners of the other tournaments this week. We clearly did not see them. We followed what was going on, but we didn't watch them because we were in Charleston. We were doing that. Before we get into that, though, we want to shout out a few people that we met or caught up with on site. Of course, we mentioned Tony and Bree. Dan, my college roommate, lives in Myrtle Beach, always goes to this tournament, kind of hosted us at this event. We stayed at the same hotel. He shuttled us back and forth from the event, and the hospitality was A+. Loved catching up with him. We also caught up with the very first person to ever spot TBS in the wild. Back in 2017, I was on Althea Gibson and I was watching Naomi Osaka. She had just finished playing and somebody called out to me and it was Carol. Carol was there with her mom and her daughter, said she was a big fan of the show. I was shook that somebody recognized it.
That was early on.
Yeah, that was such a moment for us in our history as podcasters. And so you got to meet her for the first time at this tournament after many years of corresponding.
Since then, Carol has been a massive supporter of the show, and I've been looking forward to meeting her after all this time. We got to meet her daughter as well. Rarely do I interact with people under 18, I realized. It's so unusual to talk to kids these days for me, but really, like,
well, you work from home, you have such limited interactions with people. Yes, period.
But really, like, the absolute sweetest, and she gave us a great question. Originally it was for the mailbag, but we got it in person, and she was curious about who we thought had high tennis IQ, not necessarily the biggest game, the best strokes, but who excelled because of their IQ.
And I wish I had a better answer for her, because it's hard for me to tell when coaching is so prominent, when players are so reliant on coaching more and more these days. Do we think somebody has a high IQ because they're able to execute the strategies that the coaches put in play? Back in the day, I think you could point to players who are able to troubleshoot moments in real time, which is why I think we would always default to somebody like Serena Williams, who never relied on coaching.
And who can think through matches in a way that she's not often given credit for. I would say, like, somebody who came to mind was Vondrousova for me. The way she kind of chopped up on Jabeur in the Wimbledon final.
Not chopped up.
Well, were you there?
Well, I was, and there was a bit of a self-implosion there.
Sure. But Marketa came in knowing exactly what she needed to do. Wasn't necessarily pushed that much. Elena Rybakina is somebody who's shown she can think through matches in that Wimbledon final.
Yes.
I said Daria Kasatkina. Of course, I'm biased, but she's not somebody who can rely on power. She's somebody who has to, literally construct individual points to get where she needs to go.
Novak Djokovic, clearly.
Yeah.
Back in the day, Andre Agassi, for me,
totally.
a master of that kind of stuff. I think of somebody like Karolina Muchova, somebody who has a lot of tools. A lot of times, players with a lot of tools struggle with using too many of them all the time.
Yes.
But when you have that many tools, you're able to navigate troublesome situations differently from other players because you have more outlets, you have more avenues, you have more options than somebody who is reliant on a serve +1. What do I do if that doesn't work?
If you have the brain power to pick the right tool out of all of these options that you have, that's impressive.
Not for nothing, but I think somebody like Caroline Wozniacki has high tennis IQ. Somebody like Rublev, maybe not so much.
Oh. I actually found it easier to think of people who didn't have great problem solving.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like the majority of them don't necessarily have a great tennis IQ.
But they have incredible physical skills.
They have great resources at their disposal. They have coaches. And I feel a lot of times players are too reliant on coaching and strategy. And when that strategy doesn't work in the moment, you see the frustration.
Right.
That's when you see players start to cuss at coaches, when players start to scream at boxes, because what they had prepared is not working. Then what next? Somebody like Barbora Krejcikova. She isn't always able to execute the shots that she wants to hit, but I feel like she has high tennis IQ. Thank you to Carol and her daughter. Carol, wonderful catching up with you. You are forever a TBS fave. Had such a blast chatting with your daughter.
And thanks for the question. Moving on quickly to the results this week. Ben Shelton and Francis Tiafoe in the Houston final. Huge for Francis because he's not had a great time of it lately. Even reaching a final has the potential to turn something around for him. But Ben Shelton remains a difficult matchup, having lost to him in the US Open quarterfinal last year.
Ben will take over the American #1 position from Taylor Fritz after Monte Carlo. And that was guaranteed with Taylor Fritz's first round loss. He's up to a new career high of number 14, up from 287 at the start of 2023. Prior to this tournament, he had only ever won 2 matches on clay. He was career 2-7 on clay, won a bunch of 3-set matches at this tournament. But like you said, this doesn't seem to be a good matchup for Francis.
No. But an unexpected win for Ben Shelton. And his career so far has been about breaking out unexpectedly.
In Bogota, Camila Osorio, she beats Marie Boskova, winning at home in Colombia.
Winning this title for the second time.
Matteo Berrettini, an all-Italian final, beats Lorenzo Sonego to win Marrakesh. It's Matteo's first title in almost 2 years, and that was at Queen's Club in 2022. If you recall, Matteo was out for 6 months following a foot injury at the US Open, a horrific foot injury at the US Open. He returned to reach the Phoenix Challenger final in March. His ranking had fallen all the way to 154. He's back inside the top 100 now at around 84, 85, somewhere around there.
Hubie Hurkacz wins Estoril, beating Pedro Martinez. This is Hubie's first title on clay. He now has titles on all surfaces, joining a pretty small group of active players.
Before this tournament, he thanked Casper Ruud on the internet for all the tips that he gave him during practice to play better on clay. And look!
Wow, thanks a lot. Casper was the defending champion here, and he went out in the semifinals against Martinez. Not before he attempted to knock down a drone that had interrupted his match. And I mean, the allegations, he's not dodging them. This was great, though.
He had ball kids feeding him tennis balls as if he were serving to try and strike down this drone.
This random stray drone that was flying over the stadium that interrupted play. There was a major officiating controversy in the Garin-Borges match. A huge mistake that took over a lot of the airtime from this tournament. Garin did not come out looking particularly great from the interaction when he was clearly benefiting from an error and could have conceded a point. But Garin is, he reached the first semifinal. He hasn't in quite a long time.
After what I allege Casper did in Miami, this makes sense. I mean, it's just a fully painted picture that's coming into focus. We were initially going to talk about the Saudi year-end championship deal that was announced during Charleston, but that will have to be pushed to the next episode.
It will. I was so grateful to be at the tournament and not have to deal with the discourse on the day that the news came out.
Thank you to everybody who donated to our GoFundMe campaign, because you all really are the reason why we were able to have this experience. Mm-hmm. Charleston was a banger for us. It was a success. It was so much fun. We cannot recommend that tournament enough. Of course, pay attention to the first half of this episode. Should you go, there are things you need to do to supplement your tennis viewing experience and to learn more about where you are while you're at that tournament.
If you're somebody who travels for food, which I am, the food in Charleston is out of this world.
Truly.
Try the she crab soup. Apparently it's important that the crab is a lady.
Because it makes it sweeter. We had a lunch. Our best meal was a lunch. Just a lunch. Didn't even cost that much. But it was at Amen Oyster Bar or something like
Street.
that?
Yeah. It's like on East Bay Street in downtown Charleston, near the Customs House. I had a shrimp roll that was just perfection. Just like simple food done really, really well.
I had the she crab soup. We shared oysters with Dan. I had fried shrimp with hush puppies and a cream corn.
Oh my God.
And you were like, how do you even get corn like that?
That was a revelation. I mean, Southern food is just unbelievable.
It was that girl.
Yeah.
Like that. The food really is amazing. And you don't have to spend an arm and a leg to get it. You certainly can. If you want to spend a lot of money on food.
Yes.
In Charleston, there are places you can do that.
We do not do that.
No. I'm of the opinion that if I can get the same cut of meat for half the price, I will get it for half the price. Why do I need to, we also found on our last night a gin bar that was...
Oh, I put this on our Instagram.
Amazing.
It's called the Gin Joint. And you could ask, the bartender to make a custom drink based on a few adjectives.
On their menu, they have this box with 20 adjectives. And you give the waiter 2. And then the bartender makes you a cocktail. So I think I said refreshing and boozy.
Boozy, yeah.
And I got a paper plane, which I had before and I thoroughly enjoyed.
Our friend Dan picked, I don't know what he picked, but he was like, I hope it doesn't have mezcal because I don't like mezcal. Well, lo and behold, it was essentially a mezcal milk. That's what I called it. It was something else. But oh my God. The martinis, straight up with a twist, were fantastic.
And I know we're running long, but I need to give this window into what I'm dealing with in this relationship with your food preferences.
Oh,
you were at that table and you ordered your random drink.
Refreshing and herbal were the
refreshing and herbal. You drank the whole thing and you were like, oh my God, this is the best drink I've ever had. I need to find out what's in it. The waitress had said, try it, let me know if you like it, and then I'll tell you what it actually is later on. You could not stop about this drink. The waitress comes over, I said, we're ready to find out what's in our drinks, what our drinks are. She tells me pepper plain. I'm like, makes perfect sense, love it. Dan was able to confirm that in fact, it was mezcal.
Mezcal milk.
And you found out that there was pineapple in your drink, and at which point you almost vomited.
And
so what does that tell you? that there's a bit of psychosis going on.
It's not psychosis.
Psychotic behavior.
After that, it was all I could taste. But before, I couldn't. So you just have to lie to me about what's in something.
I can't. I can't.
Anyway.
On that note, Charleston 2024 is a wrap. This episode is the Charleston Renaiissance episode. 2 I's, 2 S's.
After all this time, we still haven't talked about Miss Honeybee Cowboy Carter.
Maybe there's a special episode coming. Who knows? My name is Jonathan. You can find me on Twitter at tennis_John.
And I'm James at ElliotJMR.
2 L's, 2 T's.
We are at The Body Serve on all social media. Linktree.com/TheBodyServe. Thank you for listening.
Till next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.